1, 2, 3. This is the Cider Ranch Podcast. I'm Ben.
And I'm Mike. Go ahead.
Good evening, all you Crescentennies, and thanks once again for dipping into a little Cider Ranch. We have found ourselves on episode 24, and we have yet again another incredible guest for you guys today. He's a co-host of the Vancouver with JPat and Drancer. Finds himself in the host chairs for TSN 1040's daily sports shows from time to time. He's covered the 2010 Olympics, and of course, the Canucks daily reporter, TSN's very own Jeff Paterson. Jeff, thanks for coming on. How are you today?
I'm delighted. I'm guest 24, am I? Or were there guests right from the start of the program?
We didn't start with any guests.
Oh, okay. So I'm actually higher up the list than 24.
You're nice. Probably, I don't know, 7 or 8, but like
I'd say you're I'd say you're 7 or 8, but right now it's looking good. I'd just say you're number 1 in our hearts.
Yeah,
top 10 for sure.
We've actually had a couple. We actually did Jay on right before. And we also had on Rick Dollywall as well. So we've been kind of going down the TSN tree, so to speak, but it's been awesome. Yeah. So thank you so much for coming on. We really appreciate that. How's it going?
Good. It's as we record, this is an off night, obviously, as the Canucks get set to officially play playoff hockey after the play-in round. It's still getting used to sort of the semantics there, but it is officially playoff hockey. And you know, it's cool to sort of feel that vibe in the city again. It's been a long time coming, obviously. And, you know, I mean, I've been on the job for 20 years in this market and longer than that covering hockey. Yep. So I've seen a lot of dark days for the Vancouver Canucks, but I was there every step of the way as well in 2011. So, you know, not suggesting that they're going to win the Stanley Cup this spring or this summer, although hockey in a bubble, you know, all bets are off to some degree. So, you know, I was pretty impressed with the way they played against Minnesota. And, you know, like, you're going to have to beat some good teams along the way. So pretty intriguing matchup to draw the Stanley Cup champs here in the first official round of the playoffs.
Definitely. And hey, Jeff, because I'll be honest with you, like I've been listening to you for years, probably going back 10 plus years now, ever since I was quite young. And honestly, just hearing your voice now, it's extremely nostalgic for me because you have such a very unique radio voice. And it's just whenever I hear you on the radio, it's very distinguishable in the sense that, hey, that's Jeff Paterson. I got to tune in because this is Jeff. Now on our show, we always before we get into the Canucks, because I know that's a topic of our discussion, we always want to have conversations with people about their background and like what they've done in the past. And for us personally, we like to have interesting conversations. If someone were to ask you how you started up in the business and what motivated you to be where you are today, what would you tell them?
I grew up in a household with the radio on nonstop, from like 7 a.m. till 8 or 9 at night. If the Canucks were playing later than that, locked on CKNW, which was, you know, they called themselves the top dog. And really, I mean, they were the big station. This is way before all sports or 2 all sports stations in the market. And so, you know, it was news, it was talk. They had a large sports department. They had the Canucks broadcasts. And that was just, my parents flipped the radio on in the morning, and I sort of developed this fascination for these voices, these varied voices in this box that were talking to me. And, you know, they felt like part of the family. They would be there when we were eating breakfast. They would be there through the day, the talk shows. And, you know, there was just something about having this forum to express yourself. And for these guys that had opinions on the talk shows, like I loved when they would start sparring with their guests. And, you know, to me, it was exciting. And so I from a young age, probably younger than most people would suggest that they got into talk radio. But it was just, there's something really cool about it to me. And so, you know, that was the introduction. I won't say that at the time I was 8 years old, I was like, hey, I'm going to get into hockey broadcasting. But I do think that the seed was planted that, like, this is really cool. Like, and you know, I became a big fan of Jim Robson and Tom Larscheid and listened. I would, you know, one of those guys that would, you know, with a transistor radio and an earplug and fall asleep listening to Canuck games. And it just kind of grew from there. And if you ask my parents, you know, by the time I was probably 12, like I had a sense that, hey, these guys are getting paid to talk about sports and talk about hockey and do play-by-play and all that kind of stuff. And so it just kind of was gradual from there. But certainly by the time I was in high school, I had a pretty clear view of what I wanted to do with my life. Now, no guarantees, obviously, but I sort of laid out a bit of a game plan. Everybody in my family had gone to UBC. I'm born and raised in North Van, live there now as well, so I've come full circle. But everybody in my family, my parents and both of my older brothers had gone to UBC. So it just sort of seemed like, there was a little internal pressure, to follow and get a degree. Like if broadcasting didn't work out, at least I wanted to have a university degree. And I didn't really feel like I knew I wanted to go to BCIT and take the broadcasting program, but it's a 2-year program and, it gets you ready for the real world. And I didn't think coming out of high school, if I was 17 or 18, I didn't think by the time I was 19 or 20 that I would be ready to jump into the broadcast biz. Back then, I say way back then, I mean, this is the early 90s, it was, this is pre-internet. Like these were the pros, right? Like these were big time, big voices and people I had grown up listening to, and I was a little intimidated. So I wanted to get, 4 years at university was going to allow me to grow up. I could go have some fun. And the whole plan was always to go to BCIT, which ultimately I did. And as it turned out, the UBC thing was good. I've got a degree in political science. I hope to never have to use it, but it's there filed away somewhere, the diploma. But it allowed me to grow up, right? Like those years from 18 to 22. I mean, you do a ton of growing. And as it turned out, I got into the campus radio station at UBC at CITR. First year, I focused on my studies. And once I felt like I had a year under my belt and kind of had the lay of the land, most of my Friday and Saturday nights were spent calling play-by-play of UBC hockey or basketball or football. When a lot of my buddies were joining fraternities and going to frat parties, I would go to the frat party after I had, put in a shift on a Saturday night, but I didn't feel like I missed out. Like I still had the social side of that whole university experience, but I was also really getting practical hands-on experience doing this play-by-play. I hosted a talk show, through the radio station at UBC. The Canucks allowed us twice a month to go with a press pass into the press box. That's the first time I ever covered a Vancouver Canuck game. In fact, it was Trevor Linden's rookie year.
Wow.
And
Wow.
yeah, so, it was a great hands-on experience before I ever got to BCIT. And when I got to BCIT, I was so far ahead of my classmates in the early going. Now they caught up. Like I went through school with some really talented people at BCIT, but talk about feeling confident, like you were ahead of the class. Like I had 3 years of on air where some of these people signed up and had never been in front of a microphone. It's not like today where, two guys like you can throw together a podcast and get actual hands-on experience of the microphone. It was different then, and the landscape was totally different. So, I look back fondly on those years at UBC doing play-by-play, getting a chance to cover all sorts of different sports, even though hockey was always my love. I mean, this is sort of how old I am and how different the landscape is in the media now. Yeah. There were a lot of nights back then in the early 90s when Jim Robson was calling a Canucks game on NW and I was calling a UBC hockey game on CITR, and we were the only two guys in Vancouver doing hockey play-by-play. Like the Giants didn't exist. They're now like all the midget teams have online play-by-play, and there's just so many more opportunities, but back then there weren't. And so, I saw it for what it was. I jumped at every chance that I could get to get in front of a microphone. And, here I am all these years later, still behind a mic. So I think that time then was what, it served me well. And I look back on it remarkably fondly.
That's incredible. And I think it's really cool to see how, because it's very similar to kind of what Jay told us, as well as your start from back then, from being so far ahead of kind of your classmates at that time and being able to have the hands-on experience before you're getting into what you're getting into really kind of put you in a spot to succeed. And so you were saying that you were starting to do commentary on junior hockey and things like that. So, and you were saying that that kind of was the precursor to the Canucks. So is that how you kind of got into the Canucks then, from just doing all that? And did someone approach you one time, or was that something that you kind of had to like apply for? I know that's not the correct term, but like.
Well, I mean, the dream was always to do play-by-play.
Yeah.
And certainly in the NHL, that was the hope. And I sort of joke that the dream isn't dead. It's just on a shelf somewhere. It's not likely to happen, but you never say never in this business. So, I'm not anticipating that I'm going to get a chance to do NHL play-by-play at this stage. And look, I've had a terrific career. I'm not the least bit frustrated or disappointed. Times change, life change. It takes you in, different avenues. And, so like, I think back to those UBC days, and it's funny. I mean, I don't have recordings of some of the things that I did, but it would be a riot to go back and listen now. Like, I would do talk shows. I had a Monday talk show, half an hour, focused mostly on campus sports. Nobody was listening. Like, CITR is an alternative music station. They looked at me kind of funny. I was this guy on the straight and narrow that didn't really fit in, but I saw it for what it was, which was an opportunity to do what I wanted. Everybody, like, that was the beauty of CITR. They let anybody sort of do whatever they wanted if you were willing to put in the time. And so I wanted to do sports, so they cut me a half-hour slot on Mondays. I swear, my grandfather was the only person that listened, and he listened religiously. And I thank him. Rest his soul. But, he would tell me what I would talk about. So I knew he was listening. Like, he wasn't just blowing smoke. Like, I know that he had been listening. But what a great way to make mistakes and just kind of, again, get that experience. So I went from UBC to BCIT, and I got really lucky. Like, along the way, I think anybody that's had a successful career gets some bounces. And out of BCIT, I was still living at home with my parents, and, they had been patient with 6 years of schooling, and they knew that, I had this dream of getting into broadcasting. And look, I was prepared to move far afield. Like, at that time, people were moving out of BCIT and taking jobs in Dawson Creek and Smithers and Chetwynd and some of those places.
Dawson Creek has come up a lot, actually.
And look, times have changed. Now, I think, guys are working their way, blogging and podcasting, and it's awesome. It's so cool to have, these different avenues into the business. But back then, it was way more traditional. It was go to broadcast school and start sending out tapes and hope that somebody liked your sound. And so I had this opportunity right out of BCIT. I had an offer to go and work. It was a TV and radio. It was sort of a 2-in-1 up in Terrace. And I knew where Terrace was on a map, but I'd never been anywhere close. I think Prince George was the closest I'd ever been. And, here I had never moved away from home and really was scared shitless to, Terrace but again, I knew that was a possibility, that I might have to start in a small town. So I talked to the guy there, the boss, and he said, take a day. I know this is like a big adjustment for you, but we'd like to have you. And here's the offer. And, take a day, and by noon tomorrow, get back to me. I woke up that morning and I was prepared. I was like, all right, we're going to Terrace. And it's just kind of funny the way things work. Like, an hour before I got ready to call the guy back, the news director from CHNL in Kamloops called. And I was like, Kamloops?
Wow.
Like, I've been to Kamloops. Like, Kamloops just, I can drive to Kamloops, by noon. Like, I know where Kamloops is. And I also knew that the radio station in Kamloops had the rights to the Kamloops Blazers and did their broadcasts. And, in my head, I had sort of mapped these things out about, if I'm going to get to the NHL, I want to get into the Western Hockey League by the time I'm 30. That was sort of what I had in my head. I want to be a play-by-play guy in the Western Hockey League by the time I'm 30.
Right.
So the guy from Kamloops phones and he says, it's only a summer job, but there's a possibility of work beyond if it all goes well. And I was like, I'll bet on myself here. I'll take summer work and see where it goes. If it doesn't work out, I'm a 3-hour drive from home, rather than being up in Terrace if I didn't like what had happened and if it hadn't gone well in Terrace. So phoned the guy in Terrace, thanked him, and, he wished me well. And I moved to Kamloops. It was a news job. It wasn't sports, but I took every opportunity I could to do sportscast, to get involved with their coverage of the Kamloops Blazers. And this is at a time when the Blazers were they were it, right? They had won the Memorial Cup in 1992. I went the summer of 93. So, they were the top junior team in North America. And I was really fortunate. I knew that the guy that was doing play-by-play, he aspired to get to the National Hockey League, and he was really good.
Oh, wow.
And a year after I had moved to Kamloops, again, you talk about bounces, Kelly Moore was hired straight out of junior to do the play-by-play for the Winnipeg Jets 1.0 before they moved to Arizona.
Yeah.
So, that tells you how good he was to be able to jump right from junior hockey, to the National Hockey League. So now all of a sudden this job is open. This is the summer of 94. The Blazers have won the Memorial Cup again. They won it in 92. They won it in 94. And they were going to host the tournament in 1995. And now Kelly Moore leaves for Winnipeg. This job is open, and my eyes like light up. But I also know that, you know, they're going to get all kinds of applications. It's a great job. It's a great franchise. It's a pretty good city for the Western Hockey League at that time. You know, there's going to be all sorts of competition, and, you know, who knows why decisions are made. I mean, I was probably financially an attractive option, but I always think that probably I had that working for me. Whatever the case, I used tapes of me calling games at UBC on those Friday and Saturday nights when nobody was listening. But, you know, I submitted those tapes to my bosses in Kamloops and went all in and, you know, made the biggest pitch I could. And sure enough, I got the job. And so I wanted to be in the Western Hockey League by the time I was 30. Wow. I think I was 23 when I got hired, you know, which was incredible. And to start with this team that's the defending Memorial Cup champions, and they're going to host the Memorial Cup my first full year. And it's a team that has, you know, Jerome McGinley and Shane Doan and Darcy Tucker and Nolan Baumgartner and Jason Strudwick and Brad Lukowicz and, you know, all these guys that went on to these incredible NHL careers, and Don Hay was the head coach. And, you know, it just mind-blowing stuff for this young guy that sort of had this dream, and here it was all of a sudden. And so, you know, my first full year ended with the Blazers winning the Memorial Cup on home ice on a sunny Sunday in May of 1995. And, you know, that was kind of the start of my career, like my broadcasting, my sports broadcasting career. You know, it was all kind of coming together for me, and did 5 years there and met my wife. She actually worked a year at the radio station as well. And, you know, after 5 years, I kind of had life decisions to make. She had moved back to Vancouver. She had a job down here. And, you know, I wasn't as much fun as I was having doing the play-by-play. I wasn't making a lot of dough. Like that just, you know, that's life in a smallish town. Yeah. And they gave me this great opportunity, but I certainly wasn't getting ahead. And so I was approaching 30, and I just thought, like, you know, I have decisions to make here. Do I chase this woman that ultimately has been my wife now for 20 years, you know, or do I just continue to plug away? And at that point, John Shorthouse had just been hired for the Canucks job, and, you know, he and I are around the same age. And so I figured, like, that's a job that's not going to come up anytime soon now. And I started to look around, and, you know, I just thought, I'm going to wing it. I'm going to leave Kamloops. People there couldn't believe that, you know, I would do that just 5 years without and I didn't. Like, I did not have work. I knew enough people in Vancouver. I was confident that I could find something, but I rolled the dice and came back to Vancouver, and was fortunate enough that I got part-time work at CKNW, the station that I had grown up listening to. And here I was working in the sports department at CKNW. That was sort of a mind-blowing experience for me. And, you know, that was the summer of 99. And I worked at NW until 2006, until the Canucks rights switched and they started to sort of downsize their sports department. And I have been at Team 1040 and TSN 1040 ever since, with a little blip there. I got caught up in a corporate shuffle late in 2015 and was gone. I disappeared for a little while, but here I am. They couldn't get rid of me entirely. So it's been a pretty decent run, aside from one little blip there at TSN.
That's incredible. So I mean, sticking with the TSN theme again, first of all, I was going to say about like the Blazers. I was going to say that was going to be a team until you mentioned all those amazing players. Like those were the McGinley years. Like you were seeing these incredible players like start. I mean, and like how amazing is that as an opportunity to learn from that and to see them at that age, you know? And I know it's the cliche to say like, well, you know, they were heads and heels above, but you can tell that some of these guys were extremely gifted athletes that were just so much better. But yeah, sticking with the TSN 1040 team, for I guess just a funny thing is when you go and you sit down and you do like a co-host for it, who makes you crack up the most when you're sitting in those chairs?
You know, it's funny. I've never been a guy that's sort of had my name attached to a show. And a lot of people are like, how can you've been in the business this long and you've never really had your own show? I mean, I looked at Sports Talk Weekend when I was at NW. That was sort of my own show, but it was an extension of Dan Russell's, you know, Monday to Friday Sports Talk.
Right.
For me, I've always wanted to be involved with the Canuck broadcasts. And so in order to make that happen, you know, it always meant sort of positioning myself as a fill-in guy, because I didn't want to be tied down Monday to Friday with a talk show. Like, it's fun to do talk shows. And, you know, in my role, I've basically worked with everybody, right? And it's fun to do that. And it's fun to play off different guys. And, you know, everybody's got their strengths and everybody's got their quirks. And, you know, I'm not here to sort of call out anybody, because I've enjoyed working with all these people. It's been, you know, I think it's helped me as a broadcaster, because you got to stay on your toes, you got to stay sharp, you know, you don't fall into any kind of groove with one particular guy. So, you know, having my name on a show, that's never been a big deal for me. The way bigger deal has always been sort of to be a part of Canucks hosting pre and post game and reporting around and just stay around the game. And I love, like, all these years later, I still love the games. I love, like, the games are the show, right? The games drive the storylines, the games just describe drive the discussions. I love the post game show. Like, I love being on the front line to, you know, people in that visceral reaction. And, you know, we don't do as much calling anymore with social media. People can vent and express themselves in so many different ways that picking up the phone and calling the local radio station, it doesn't happen as often. But I think as the Canucks get on this postseason run, we're starting to see a little more traffic there on the phone boards, which is exciting to me, because it kind of takes me back to a different time in broadcasting. So who cracks me up? You know, again, everybody's got their, like, to get a chance to work with a guy like Don Taylor, who, you know, is just such an absolute legend in this business, and is as funny today as he was when I grew up watching. I mean, you hate hearing me say I grew up watching him, but, you know, he's got 10 years on me or something. But, you know, he's as funny today as he was when he was hosting Sports Page. Like, he hasn't lost it at all. So always enjoy any opportunity to get in there with Don. You know, I look at a guy like Sakaris, who certainly has his way of doing things, and sometimes you shake your head, but there's a total method to his madness. And, you know, I don't always agree with him, but that's a great talk host, right? Is somebody that gets a reaction out of you, whether you agree or, you know, I think it's important a lot of times not to agree with the host. Like, that's when a host is at his best, if he's taking a strong position and it's getting that reaction. You don't want everybody, like, it'd be boring if everybody agreed with whatever you had to say. So, you know, Blake's an easygoing guy. He's really easy to work with, and we've hosted a lot of hockey broadcasts together, so we have a long history there. You know, Moj cracks me up, just like, he's willing to sort of play the character. I mean, people want, is that a character? And a lot of what you hear on the air is Moj. I mean, he's larger than life on the air, off the air, and he's fun to, you know, he's just fun to be around. And you know, and then I haven't spent as much time working with the morning guys now, Halford and Bruff, but I have certainly spent a little bit of time. And you know, I'm on the air on all of those stations as my current role as Canuck reporter. So, you know, I work with all of them, and I just think, you know, we got a pretty good group right now, and it's a lot of fun. And, you know, it's been a bunch of dark years for the hockey club, and so much of what we do, you know, is just taking the temperature of the marketplace. And obviously the Canucks are the big game in town. So, you know, people say, oh, you guys love this because they've been bad for, no, it gets tiresome after a while if they're always bad, right?
Yeah,
like,
I don't get
that. It's not, people seem to think that that's exactly what we want. That, you know, I hear all the time, like, oh, you guys lost the rights. You know, you're just mad you lost the rights. I'll say to you guys right here, if TSN hadn't lost the broadcast rights, the current job that I have as dedicated Canuck reporter traveling around the National Hockey League to all these great cities and venues, it wouldn't exist. You think I'm mad that we lost the rights? Like, it has presented me with the opportunity of a lifetime that I didn't think would ever come my way. So I don't know, but I don't think I sound like a bitter guy that we lost the rights. I don't think radio rights mean as much now as maybe they did at one point. You know, where people are watching games on their phones now, and they're just like, you know, there is currency to having the rights. Don't get me wrong, but I don't think that we at TSN are angry that we don't have the rights. I just think, you know, it's presented different opportunities, sometimes different challenges. But for a guy like me, like, I really benefited from another sports station popping up in this city, and all of a sudden, TSN 1040, which had the rights forever and had always sent a play-by-play and a color guy out on the road with the Canucks, you know, now if you're going to be in this fight and your competition has the play-by-play and they're going to be at every game home and away, you know, TSN thought, like, we got to step up here and create this job of dedicated Canucks reporter. And I was fortunate. I mean, I made a pretty strong pitch again. I had a solid track record of experience in the market. They wanted somebody that had done some writing for the web. And, at that point I had a column in the province and I had done other web work, and, my social media was sort of taking off as well. And, again, they probably had all sorts of candidates, but here I am. And, COVID obviously has changed everybody's world, including mine. I'm not in the bubble in Edmonton, but, and that's been a change too, getting back into the swing of doing pre and post game shows from the studio, which I've done a lot of years, but haven't done the last 3 years because I've been at every Canucks game, whether at home or on the road. So, it's just, I like the sound of our station these days. I like all of the day parts and sort of the personalities that we've got. And for my role, it's just trying to bring as much Canuck color and flavor and information and, anything that the team is up to, I've sort of got to be on top of it. And so that's how I contribute to the station these days, all the shows, and, still do some writing for the web and, try to stay as active as I can on social media.
Yeah. And Jeff, honestly, like after talking to you right now, I think the name of the game right now, from what we've heard, even speaking with you today, and like Ben and I had mentioned before, we've spoken with a couple people from TSN, and you are absolutely no exception when I say you guys are some of the most positive people I think Ben and I have ever had the privilege of talking to. You guys have such a passion for what you do and such a ability to see past the negatives and to look at the positives. And you guys have the ability also to see opportunity where some people might not recognize it. And I know for yourself, where you mentioned that you were looking at moving even to Kamloops or even to Terrace, and you were saying, you know what, I'm going to move here and I'm willing to do it because I see an opportunity out of this, and this is something I want to do, and this is a career path that I want to take, and this is what I'm going to be required to do in order to get to that point. And you recognize that, hey, I have to put in the work, I have to grind, I have to get to where I need to be by doing this. And your positivity shines through, man. I'll be honest with you, like just speaking with you right now and listening to what you're saying, you have a very good outlook on life and a very good outlook on your job. And it's really cool. It sounds like TSN's a really cool place to work. And it sounds like it's a really positive environment. And like I said, you're no exception. And kind of going back to that, before we get into some Canuck stuff, because I know we're getting close to the end here, what piece of advice would you give to somebody that is dealing with a situation where they're not sure if they can pull through? Let's say they're at a crossroads in their life and they have a path they want to take. What piece of advice would you give to them?
I'm a big believer in that line about, find something you love to do and you'll never work a day in your life. And look, this business can be ugly. The job is an absolute blast. I'm covering hockey, right? Like it's what I wanted to do when I was 8 years old, and here I am all these years later. And so, the industry itself has gone through a lot of changes. It's, there are dark times. There are way too many layoffs for my liking. I've been swept up in them a couple of times, and it doesn't get any easier, whether it's, me personally or friends of mine. Like you hate to see that. And, like a lot of businesses, you're being asked to do more with less, and it can be frustrating. But at the end of the day, I have to tell myself, like, there are literally thousands of people that would love to have this opportunity that I've got right now. So on those days when I'm not digging it, you kind of give yourself a pep talk. I'm glad you brought up that point. Like I've always been a firm believer, and I think it's one of the things that's allowed me to persevere. I've been versatile, and I've never been afraid to sort of take on a challenge. I haven't mastered them all. I'll be the first to admit, but if opportunities arise, I find this in this business. And there were a lot of times, like I sort of from about 2006 to 2010, I was hanging by a thread a little bit. I was freelancing. I had a column in the Georgia Straight. I wasn't getting as many shifts at the radio station. I didn't have full-time work there. And I had 2 young kids, and there were days where I wondered if this was going to ultimately be the career that I had hoped it would be. Because to that point, it had allowed me to make a living, but all of a sudden now you got the responsibility of a family and those types of things. So anytime they asked me at the radio station to do a shift, to fill in, to host, to do whatever, I moved heaven and earth to make sure that I could find daycare for the kids. My wife was working. Because if they ask you and you say no, the next time they've got a shift, they're going to ask the guy that said yes.
Yep.
Yep.
where you said no. And I knew that, and that was always a fear that drove me. And so I tell anybody that asks me sort of for advice in this industry, it is, look for your own opportunities. Along the way, I have tried to identify day parts where, there wasn't programming. Like for the longest time on 1040, Saturdays are hockey night in Canada, right? Like it's the biggest night on the hockey schedule each week. And we were running syndicated US programming sort of from 3 until 5 o'clock. If Canuck pregame show started at 5. Well, NHL games, the full slate of the early game started at 4. And I went to the boss and I said, this US syndicated programming, they're talking college basketball all the time. Like, why wouldn't we try to capture the local market with hockey talk? Like, I want to do a show from 3 until 5 dedicated sort of to, that day in the National Hockey League. And they were like, hey, yeah, that sounds like a good idea. I've been pretty, like right now I'm hosting playoff game night. This is something that we used to do way back when, I had sort of suggested to the bosses, like, let's push it. Let's find out if there's an audience in a different day part. There's such buy-in around the Canucks now. There are shift workers. There are students that are staying up late. There's taxi drivers, whatever, so I've always kind of been a guy that's tried to get a little creative and try to create opportunities for myself. And when they ask me, I don't say no. And I'm not afraid to try something. If I dabble at something and it doesn't work, at least I gave it a shot there. So, I've seen too many. I went to school with guys. I've seen too many others that have come in and said, I'm going to do this. Like, these are the goalposts. I'm setting them right now. I don't want to work weekends. I don't want to work nights. Look, if you're truly into sports, if you want to be successful in this, when do sports take place? Nights and weekends, right? Other than, hockey in a bubble when they play all day. But nothing is as it seems here in the summer of 2020. But for these people that like, I only want to work Monday to Friday, like, get out of here. Go. Yeah, that's one less person I have to deal with. If you're not going to work weekends and nights, then get lost, and I'm going to walk right over you. 100%. And I just thought it was the craziest thing. So I never understood that. Like, take a look at the landscape, know what you're getting yourself into, and understand that as great as this line of work can be, it comes with some sacrifices. There's no doubt. I have missed so many family functions and barbecues and whatever, and I'm sure they were great, but this job's been pretty great too for the most part. So there's a price to be paid, and I was willing to pay that price, maybe more than some others. But I would just say to anybody, and really in any line of work, I think a lot of that can apply, is, if you find yourself doing something that you're not totally invested in, don't waste time. Life is short. I've sort of figured that out as we've gone here and watched my kids grow up, and time really does fly by. So if you're in a position where, you still got time on your side, I would say think long and hard, find your passion, find a way to, integrate your passion into your professional life. And even now, like, there are a lot of people that I know get frustrated because, they're blogging or they're podcasting and they are, I want to cover hockey. Well, first of all, there's a really limited number of jobs full-time. I'm lucky to have one. But, if you are just dabbling in it, you're still writing about hockey, right? If you have a blog, like, maybe you're not monetizing it right now, but don't give up. If you're good at it and you're getting positive feedback, look for opportunities. But, that kind of stuff didn't exist as I started. So even if you drove a bus by day and really wanted to be a hockey writer, you can still be blogging about hockey. Like, what an amazing opportunity to create content that people will read. And, all it really takes is the right person to read something or listen to your podcast and bump it along and give it a little bit of love on social media. Like, I'm a big believer that strong content will always find an audience. So, get frustrated, sure, but don't quit. Don't throw in the towel. Just keep at it. And even if you're driving that bus, tell yourself, yeah, I'm driving the bus, but I'm also a hockey writer and I'm getting a chance to sort of do what I love to do. So keep at it. I mean, that's the beauty of the internet right now is, the table is endless. It's just, it's up to you to sort of carve your niche and maintain your spot at it.
That's incredible advice. And we really appreciate that too, for just going in, and explaining, the whole being able to not, be that one guy that is taking that shot. And, so many people are saying like, well, I haven't been able to get where I wanted to get yet, or I haven't been able to do what I wanted to do. But, you were the one to say yes to all those types of things where maybe perhaps someone said no. And, that obviously has paid dividends to be able to take all those types of things and, like you said, create opportunity for yourself, right? We thank you for that. We kind of wanted to ask just a couple questions about the Canucks NHL, and then we usually like to finish off with like a would you rather question. So I guess just the first thing just about for that, at least in my opinion, it seems like the Canucks always get up for the Blues. I don't know what it is about it, but how do you think that series is going to go?
I give the Canucks a legitimate shot here. I think some of it is, summer hockey in a bubble, all bets are off. I don't know how motivated the Blues are. I think in normal times, which these aren't, you'd really be invested to defend your Stanley Cup title. But who knows if there are guys that have a foot outside the bubble already. It's hard to know. So I think of all years to take on the defending champs, this might be a pretty good year. The home ice advantage thing is kind of out the window, all those schemes, in the same place. And the fact that the Canucks have won 3 in a row and have a little traction, and, even the guys that have never had playoff experience, it's a small sample, but you can't say they haven't played postseason hockey now. I mean, take what you can from those 4 games against Minnesota. I think Minnesota is a good tune-up matchup now to go up against St. Louis because they play the same sort of style, not a ton of star power, just scoring by committee, Big D. St. Louis is better across the board, and that certainly has better goaltending. But no, I mean, I think the Canucks, there's enough to like there. They're top-end guys. I'm not going to say that they will beat the Blues, but I think that they've got more than a puncher's chance here. And, the other thing is the Canucks on a bit of a run, and St. Louis has yet to win a game in this return to play. It's the NHL. Like you always hear guys say, you can't flip the switch. We're going to find out. What if St. Louis scuffles along for a few more games? I mean, they could be down a couple to the Canucks, and then, then trouble sets in. So they're the champs. I'll give them every benefit of the doubt, but, the Canucks will have shot. I mean, they played them hard throughout the season, and their top guys are going right now. So I don't know. I'm excited. I think the city's excited, and I'm looking forward to see. I mean, you're going to have to beat some good teams along the way if you're going to get on any kind of run, and the Blues are the champions. So step into the ring and take your best shot.
Yeah. Just to quickly add to that. Canucks look great. Young guys look great. A lot of high scoring offense from these guys. What do you think about Markstrom right now? Is he making you a little bit nervous?
I'd like to see more consistency. I'm sure he would, and I'm sure the coaching staff would as well. He was the hero of Game 3, a shutout, and it looked like, hey, this guy that had never played in the playoffs, like he's arrived, midseason Markstrom's here, and then the back-to-backs, and I don't know if it was a little bit of mental fatigue, but he just looked off. And so, there were highs and there were lows. I'd like to find a little more of that middle ground for Jacob Markstrom. I don't know that I'm worried because there haven't been many nights over the last couple of seasons like there were in Game 4 against Minnesota, but if there are more of those ahead, then trouble is probably lurking right around the corner. So I don't know if I'm worried about Markstrom, but it's interesting that this series against St. Louis is going to follow the same schedule path as the one against Minnesota, where games 3 and 4 are back-to-back. And, that's where he ran into a bit of trouble. So he and the coaching staff, they have to be aware of that, obviously, and they only take them one at a time. But, how do they handle Markstrom? How do they work him on the off days and rest and those types of things so that, if it was mental fatigue, like remember, I mean, he'd been off longer than everybody else because of the knee injury. So for him to get thrown back in and all of a sudden play 4 and 6, if you talk to guys in the NHL, a lot of times, it's not so much back-to-back games, and even 3 and 4 nights isn't the problem. They do find that 4 and 6 is where trouble arises in terms of fatigue, and that's something Markstrom just hadn't done in 6 months or whatever. So I'm not surprised, I guess, that 4 and 6 caused a little bit of problem, but I'm curious to see how he responds and reacts. We know that games 3 and 4, so they're going to get another one of those situations. How does he handle it? How does he perform in that in that situation?
How have you found Vandenberg? To me, he hasn't seemed out of place, even for a guy that's slated to be a 7 or 8 D man.
Yeah, and didn't play in Game 4, but was a late scratch. Took the warm up and didn't play. So it was interesting that Ollie Levy took the warm up in Game 3, didn't play, and then took the warm up in Game 4 and did play. So that probably tells you that Vandenberg was nursing something in Game 3, but felt he was okay to go. But again, back to back, there wasn't much turnaround time. So. It's going to be interesting because Jordy Ben, who was away, the birth of his child down in Texas, is back. And I don't think he's an option for Game 1 against St. Louis. But Probably will be by the second game and beyond. So Travis Green's going to have some options on that depth defense position, whether it's Fantenberg, whether it's Ben. If they had to turn to Ollie Levy again, it'd be kind of curious to see which way it goes. Fantenberg's been okay, but look, it's going to get tougher here. The Blues, 1 through 12 up front, as I said, a little bit like Minnesota, and yet I just think better across the board. And so the Blues will have last change in the first couple of games. Be interesting to see if, they try to game the matchups. Can they get their top guys out against the Canucks bottom pair? I love all that sort of game within the game stuff and the adjustments that are made. So we'll see what happens. But Fanberg's been okay, but I also think that he hasn't been so good that he couldn't come out of the lineup again. I mean, they won game 4 without him. So, in terms of him being indispensable, I think that shows you right there that, and Levy barely played. He played 6 minutes. But, I'm not sure that Fantenberg is locked into that 6th spot. So we'll see. But for me, it's Myers is more the concern with 9 penalties in that first round series. Like, he's got to smarten up. He has to stay out of the box. I mean, you can't put the Canucks shorthanded, and you can't ask Evan Edler just to rack up 8, 9, 10 minutes of shorthanded time a night. Like, it compounds. Those minutes are too hard. Tyler Myers, play hard, but you got to show a little bit of discipline as well.
100%. And even going back to what you were talking about, Levy, I've been hearing a lot of hype on social media and with TSN, I believe, where they're talking about Levy being a Travis Green favorite. Is that something that is true? Because I know we've heard that Travis Green really likes Levy, even though we haven't seen too much from him. And to be honest, even watching him in the most recent game, very quiet night from him, not very per se noticeable. Can you speak to that at all?
Well, I think it's a good thing when a guy making his NHL debut isn't all that noticeable. I mean, nobody was expecting him to be Bobby Orr, right? Like, just coming in again, they measured minutes. They tried to find him matchups that he wasn't going up against Minnesota's best players, and he was fine. I mean, there's just been so much talk around him for 4 years since he was that 5th overall pick, and a lot of people wondered if he would ever play in the NHL. And so, just kind of with the track record and the history and the injuries and everything else, in some ways it was fitting that Ollie Levy makes his NHL debut in a summer bubble play-in, nothing is as it sort of was in the normal times. And so there he is. But he's played in the NHL now. Nobody can take that away from him. Travis Green's admitted, he just hasn't seen him much. Travis Green's been in the NHL. Levy's been in the American Hockey League for the most part. But to the kid's credit, he came in, he had a good, strong training camp and continued to kind of get better as the camp went along and seemed to impress Travis Green. I don't think you would say he was a favorite of Travis Green's at this point, but I think Green was encouraged by what he saw to the point that he played him the other night. And, these are high stakes games, right? I mean, that's the elimination game. He had other options. There was so much talk around Brogan Rafferty all year in the season he had in the American Hockey League. And yet when they needed a depth defenseman, it was a left side guy and Rafferty's a right hander, but still for Ollie Levy to get the nod, and he played in that exhibition game against Winnipeg. So, something has happened here along the way that's allowed Levy to kind of separate himself from both Rafferty and Jalen Chatfield, and good for him. I mean, he's had, talk about overcoming obstacles and hurdles and everything else. It hasn't been an easy path to the NHL. So I felt good for the guy, and for the 6 minutes that he saw, I thought he was fine.
Well, Jeff, we have one last question for you, and then we'll do our would you rather, and we'll let you go. I know that you got to get going here. But so in terms of, I love Sebastian Aho, and I've always kind of been a Canes fan from just seeing them kind of sputter from where they were at to where they are now. Is there a specific player that stands out to you, or because I remember you saying you just, you're a student of the game, but you love just watching it. So is there someone specifically that someone maybe a Hawk fan doesn't know of, or that you just like to watch, or or a team that you like to watch that may necessarily does something that is just unique to the style of play?
I mean, there's a couple. This isn't going out on a limb anywhere, but I can't get enough of Nathan MacKinnon. I just the speed and the power, and I get what Connor McDavid is and does, and I'm in awe of McDavid a lot of nights, but there's just something about the way that Nathan MacKinnon sort of stalks his opponents. That's the term I always use when he's got the puck. He's just got such a hunger to score and looks dangerous every single shift. And I just think that's so cool that, there are a lot of really good players in the NHL. He's separated himself. He's joined that upper echelon of legitimate stars. And, you know, I've got my eye on him in Colorado this playoffs, because I just think that there is a hunger there that maybe doesn't exist with a lot of other teams. Yeah. Carolina's fun. I'll give you that. You know, Aho and Teravainen and obviously Svechnikov. You know, they've got some really nice pieces there in Carolina, and I won't be the least bit surprised if they get on some sort of run. And, you know, I just like the fact that they seem to have fun with the game and the whole post-game thing that they've done the last couple of years. Like, you know, hockey is sort of too buttoned up too often that why not? Like, get out, it's a game, have fun with it, and they do. So, yeah, curious to see there. And what I love about playoff hockey, even in the summer in a bubble, is just the chance to see some players that you don't see all the time, night in and night out. Like, I don't watch the Columbus Blue Jackets an awful lot, but, you know, to see Zach Werenski and Seth Jones and sort of what makes those guys so special, and people talking about them being, you know, the best defense pair in the NHL, perhaps. Like, you know, I've seen, like, look, I saw them play the Canucks twice this year and kind of kept as close an eye on them as I could in those games. But I'll be the first to admit, I don't watch a lot of Blue Jackets hockey on television. So, you know, I love that opportunity about the playoffs to watch teams that maybe you don't watch all the time. And here they are now front and center, and will be for the next bunch of weeks. And so, yeah, I mean, in some ways it's overload with all these games, but at the same time, when the game hasn't been there for 4 months, it's like, bring it on. I can handle the overload, and, you know, just getting started here.
Yeah, well, I totally agree with it. I think it's exciting to see it. It's still odd to see with all the, you know, no one in the obviously in the crowd, but yeah. So we always love to finish our episodes with a would you rather. So we got one for you. So would you rather?
Is it the same one for all your guests?
No, very different.
Oh, okay.
I would not ask this to a flat earther. Trust me.
Okay, I got you.
Would you rather be at Rogers Arena for an OT goal scored by Elias Pettersson to win the cup, or have Jim Benning hand over the reins to you as the new GM of the Canucks and make any changes as you see fit for the rest of your life, but obviously no guarantee of that cup?
Look, I want to see the city of Vancouver rewarded with a Stanley Cup. Yeah. You know, the fan in me has sort of been squeezed out. Like, and times have changed a little bit in this business. I think we see more people that have sort of, you know, taken their fandom and harnessed that passion and worked their way into the business to have a voice. And that's fine. I mean, the business has changed. The world changes. You have to adapt. I come from a time where there was a little bit more independence, and I felt, you know, the need to have a little bit of a buffer between myself and the team and sort of drop the fandom. So, but look, there are so many people that are doing so much good work covering this hockey club, which is the roundabout way of bringing it back to, I don't see myself as a fan anymore, but I want the city of Vancouver to win the Stanley Cup. Like, I'm born and raised here. I know what it means to so many people. So if I can be at Rogers Arena and Elias Pettersson is hoisting the Stanley Cup, I assume Bo Horvat would hoist it first as the captain, but then he can pass it. You can pass it. Oh, maybe. Who knows? Maybe there'll be a mutiny. But no, I don't want to be the general manager. Like, some people think, like, oh, you guys in the media, you think you all have the right answers. No, that's not the way the media works. Like, I have no designs on being the general manager of the Vancouver Canucks. I'm happy with the job that I've got. There are a lot of days where being the GM of the Vancouver Canucks or any NHL team would suck. Like, you know, you take a lot of slings, you take a lot of darts. It comes with the territory. Mind you, the victory would be remarkably sweet, I imagine, if in fact Jim Benning can assemble a Stanley Cup winner. But I have no designs. That's not something that I view. So that's a pretty easy question for me. I would much rather sit back, cover another Vancouver Canucks Stanley Cup run, and to see Elias Pettersson with the cup on home ice, and hopefully would turn and give it to Quinn Hughes, and, you know, away you go from there. So hands down, 1,000%, that's my answer. It's really not even a difficult decision.
I love it. I love the answer.
Gotta say, Jeff, and it was not a difficult decision to ask you to be on our show. Let us tell you that. It was phenomenal. It was easy. You know, like I said, you've been a part of our lives for so long. We've been listening on the radio for so many years. I think it was only natural that we extended this invite to you and we're able to speak with you today, especially because of the fact that you're in the business that we love listening to, we love being a part of, and it's a privilege to be able to speak with you, man. Thanks again for doing this with us. We really do appreciate it. We know you got to get to it. You know, you're a busy man. You've got a lot of hockey to cover. So once again, everybody, thanks again for dipping into another side of Ranch. My name is Mike.
And I'm Ben.
And thanks again, everybody. Thanks, Jeff.
You bet.